clock at 4. Lowry, a 2, got it!
The 2015-16 Toronto Raptors marked a massive, foundational shift for the franchise, successfully shedding a long history of postseason failures and laying the organizational groundwork for their first NBA championship.
And a career high for Kyle Lowry. DeRozan pushed. Joseph in the corner for the win. Got it! Corey! Norman Powell looking with the steal. We are tied. 92-92.
Lowry, half-court heave, a prayer at the buzzer.
Doesn't go. Bismack with the thunderous slam. Way to the rim. Denied. The other way. To Biz. Yes. You just saw that. Getting it done at both ends.
Lowry for 3. Making history in Toronto today, advancing to the franchise's first ever Eastern Conference Final. Joseph pulls back, puts up a 3. Bang! It's official now. It's the greatest season in Raptors history.
DJ 91.
Hello there, this is DJ 91, back with another sports video. My last video was about the Raptors past season that had just finished in the playoffs. But now I'm gonna take it back by a decade and do the 2016 challenge. And by the way, y'all remember how lit Toronto was that year? We had All-Star Weekend in the city for the first time ever. And in the same breath, had the best slam dunk contest up here. Drake putting out Views, Tory Lanez dropping his first album. Good times, man, good times. But for this video, we're gonna do a deep dive into the Raptors 2015-16 season. Yeah, I know, we'd rather reminisce about 2019 when we won the chip, but it's not about the destination, it's about the journey and how you got there. And this season was what had caused a major shift in the franchise and became the foundation for their championship aspirations. Before I go any further, don't forget to hit the like button, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button as well. I'd greatly appreciate it. Just 2 clicks, it won't cost you a thing. This is YouTube, not OnlyFans. It's free to subscribe and watch videos on here. Now, let's get into the content. Prior to the season, the Raptors had came off a disappointing ending in the 2014-15 season. They had a decent regular season, finishing as the 4th seed and winning 49 games, a franchise record at the time, but had a terrible postseason, losing in the first round yet again, this time in a sweep by the Washington Wizards, despite having the home court advantage. With one of their main guys not playing well, and also having their season ended by a washed-up Paul Pierce for the 2nd year in a row. They had just began a new playoff streak, but up until this point, the Raptors had only won 1 playoff series in their 20-year history, which was way back in 2001 during the Vince Carter era. In the 2015 offseason, it was clear that changes needed to be made to improve this team for next year. They needed to improve on defense. Last season, their defense was terrible, ranking 26, which was one of the worst defenses in the league that year. So their main focus was adding some defenders to the team, while continuing to build around their new all-star backcourt duo of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. Their backup point guard, Lou Williams, was a clear defensive liability. So without hesitation, the Raptors would let him walk in free agency despite winning 6th Man of the Year. He would end up signing a 3-year deal with the Lakers. A couple other guys they would let go at free agency was Amir Johnson and Tyler Hansbrough, who also ended up signing elsewhere. They would also trade away their backup shooting guard, Gravis Vasquez, to the Bucks for a future 1st-round pick and draft rights to their 2nd-round pick. One of the guys the Raptors would get in free agency was DeMar Carroll, signing him to a 4-year deal, who at the time was an elite 3-and-D wing stopper, coming off his career best year with the 60-win Hawks who had went to the conference finals. They would then get Bismack Biyombo on a 1+1 deal, a 6'8" center with a high motor providing a surge of energy on the defensive end with his elite rebounding and shot blocking. He would play backup center for the team. They would sign Luis Scola to a 1-year deal, which was a veteran pickup. He would be their starting power forward, providing durability and a high IQ. And to replace Lou Williams, they would sign Toronto native Corey Joseph, who was a steady ball handler, a solid inside scorer, reliable playmaker, championship experience, and most importantly, brought defense. He was a tenacious on-ball defender at his position. The Raptors would also pick up some young guards through the draft that summer. In the first round, they would select DeLon Wright with the 20th overall pick, who would end up becoming a third stringer while being developed through the 905 team. And for their second round pick, they would have the Bucks draft rights to Norman Powell, making that Vasquez trade an absolute genius move. Little did we know, this guy would eventually end up being one of the pieces needed in their pursuit of a championship. And after all the moves were made, the Raptors had become a more balanced team. They now had offense and defense. Heading into the season, this is what their roster looked like. They had a starting lineup of Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, DeMarre Carroll, Luis Scola, and Jonas Valanciunas. And for their bench, their key guys would be Terrence Ross, Norman Powell, Bismack Biyombo, Patrick Patterson, Corey Joseph, and James Johnson, with more than half of the names who were still on the team from last season, keeping their core intact while retooling their roster. But when it came for season predictions, most pretty much had them finishing with the same result as they did last season. The Vegas betting odds had them winning at least 45-46 games. A few experts had them winning anywhere from 42 to 50 games. And at the time, a stacked Cavaliers team with LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love had the Eastern Conference in a chokehold, with no one else seeming to pose a threat to them. Nobody, including us fans, could have really gauged how good the Raptors would be that season, whether if it was going to be a step forward, a step back, or just a duplicate of the last two seasons. And at this point, the only thing the Raptors could do is to just let their game do the talking. In order to prove everyone how good they really were on paper, they had to get out there and ball. On October 28th, it was go time. The Raptors played their season opener at home versus the Pacers. And mind you, back then it was still called the Air Canada Center, ACC for short. The Raptors would start the season off with a win, beating the Pacers 106-99 off a game-high 25 points by DeRozan. This would turn into a 5-game winning streak, beating the Celtics, Bucks, Mavericks, and Thunder, getting off to an impressive 5-0 start before losing a game. Their first of 3 regular season games against the Cavaliers was at home on November 25th, who at the time were a little short-handed, with Kyrie not having played a single game yet while recovering from a knee injury that he suffered during last year's finals. At the time, the Raptors were 9-6, and they would end up beating them 103-99 off a game-high 27 points by Lowry, improving to 10-6, setting the tone for this matchup. January 4th, they would play their next game against the Cavs on the road, this time fully healthy with Kyrie back in their lineup. And the Raptors were 21-14 going into this game, and they would lose 122-100, falling to 21-15. But after this, the Raptors immediately flushed that game and would go on an 11-game winning streak from January 16th to January 30th. Their longest winning streak of the season, elevating from 21-15 to 32-15. At the time, this was also their longest winning streak in franchise history, as well as their first ever double-digit winning streak. For All-Star Weekend, both Lowry and DeRozan became All-Stars, making it their first time appearing in an All-Star game together, while the city was hosting for the whole weekend. After the All-Star break, it was back to the regular season. The Raptors would play their third and final regular season game against the Cavs at home on February 26. They had one more chance to prove a point against this team, this time in a very intense game with a playoff-like atmosphere. The Raptors would once again come out on top, beating the Cavs 99-97 off a clutch game-winning shot by Lowry, who carried them with a career-high 43 points. With this victory, they would win the regular season series against the Cavs and improve to 39-18. On March 30th, with 2 weeks left in the season, the Raptors got their 50th win in a 105-97 home victory against the Hawks, reaching a new milestone, making it their first ever 50-win season. By the end of the season, the Raptors finished 56-26, a new franchise record. They would finish as the number 2 seed, just 1 game behind the Cavaliers. This was the highest seeding that they had ever achieved in the Eastern Conference standings. This also gave them home court advantage. It seems like the moves they made were starting to pay off, but the job was far from finished. They were going to have to prove it in the playoffs this time, and they would get tested very early. In the first round, they would go against the Pacers, who were the 7th seed. Although they were no longer the contender that they were 2 to 3 seasons prior, they were still a team that was capable of a first-round upset. And also, they still had Paul George, who at the time was a superstar talent and had the most experience with a couple conference finals appearances under his belt. Saturday, April 16th, Game 1 of the series would tip off. But in typical Raptors fashion, they would lose Game 1 by a score of 190, failing to break the Game 1 curse that had been haunting them forever. At this point, still not having won a playoff game in 2 years, this was also a missed opportunity for them to make a good impression on the league to prove themselves as a contender. Paul George led the way with a game-high 33 points, while no one of the Raptors could even score 20. Game 2 was a must-win, and the Raptors had to make adjustments. They would do just that and win by a score of 98-87, tying the series, with Valanciunas leading the way with 23 points and 15 rebounds. Then, it was time for them to go on the road. Game 3 in Indiana, the Raptors would win 101-85 to go up 2-1 in the series. Game 4, the Pacers would return the favor and win 100-83 to tie the series. Raptors would head back home for Game 5. Coach Dwayne Casey would make the move to bench Luis Scola and insert Patrick Patterson into the lineup at the 4. At first, it wasn't looking good for the Raptors, as they trailed by 15 at the end of the first quarter. The Raptors would stay afloat in the second quarter, but were still trailing at halftime, down by 5. Throughout the third quarter, the Pacers continued to keep them at bay, maintaining the lead going into the fourth quarter. The Raptors were still down by double digits in a pivotal Game 5. For this final quarter, they were going to have to dig deep if they wanted to win this game, and they would do just that. They would start the fourth quarter on a tear, and within 5.5 minutes, the Raptors would go on a 15-2 run to tie the game. And during that stretch, a memorable play would make the highlight reel, where Norman Powell forces a turnover and going on a fast break, finishing with a Superman dunk to tie the game. This had the Air Canada Center and Jurassic Park going into a frenzy as the Raptors would start gaining the momentum. This play right here is what made the energy shift in that game as they started to feel confident with their home crowd rallying behind them. The Raptors would keep their foot on the gas and would take the lead from the Pacers, going up by 6 with 3 minutes left. The game would go down to the wire as the Pacers were able to creep back, making it a 1-point game with 15 seconds left. On the next Raptors possession, the Raptors would send them to the free throw line, fouling DeRozan. He would make both of his free throws to make it a 3-point game. The Pacers would fail on their opportunity to tie the game, and the Raptors would come out on top, winning 102-99 after outscoring the Pacers 26-9 in the fourth quarter. They would go up 3-2 in the series. They were just one win away from advancing to the second round for the first time in 15 years. They were that close to ending that drought a couple years prior in 2014. But they would have to go on the road and win Game 6 in front of a loud Indiana crowd. The Pacers, however, weren't going to go down without a fight. The Raptors were able to start off the game in control, leading by 4 at halftime. But in the second half, it was all Pacers. They would outscore the Raptors 61-39 in the second half and come out on top 101-83, making it the largest margin of victory between both teams in the series. Now, the pressure was on the Raptors to win Game 7 at home. The odds didn't seem to be in their favor given their playoff history, having never won a Game 7 before, and they had an opportunity this year to finally change that. And they were going to give it their all to do so. Just like Game 6, the Raptors were off to a good start, leading by 5 at the end of the first quarter and maintaining the lead by halftime, leading by 6. In the third quarter, they remained consistent and steadily grew the lead to double digits heading into the fourth quarter. With 7.5 minutes left in the game, the Raptors were up by as much as 16, looking like they were going to run away with a victory and close out the series. But with that much time left, no lead is safe. Pacers would call a timeout and they would start to rally back. And within 5 minutes, the Pacers would go on a 15-2 run to cut the lead down to 3 with just 2.5 minutes left, applying pressure on the Raptors. This game was getting down to the wire with everyone in the city on edge. With less than 30 seconds left, the clock was winding down and the Raptors were still up by 3. Pacers have possession. Rather than going for a 3 to tie, they were strategically attempting to go for a quick 2 to cut the lead down to 1, but they would turn it over off a bad pass by Paul George and DeRozan coming up with the steal. He was able to burn a lot of time off the clock before getting fouled with just 6 seconds left. All he had to do now was make his free throws and the Raptors win the series, and he would do just that. DeRozan would make both of his free throws, giving the Raptors a 5-point lead, leaving the Pacers no sufficient amount of time to come back. And just like that, the Raptors won Game 7, 89-84. Off a game-high 30 points by DeRozan. The Raptors would win a Game 7 for the first time ever, and for the first time in 15 years, they would make it to the second round. That very same night, the Miami Heat had won Game 7 of their first round series against the Charlotte Hornets. So for the second round, it was the Raptors versus the Heat, led by a 34-year-old Dwayne Wade, a 3-time champion who was still playing at a high level and had a lot left in the tank. But they were a little short-handed, with their second All-Star and former Raptor, Chris Bosh, who had been sitting out since the All-Star break, was unable to play in the postseason after being diagnosed with blood clots yet again. If it was up to him, he'd be playing, given how compelling of a series this would have been if Bosh was facing his former team in the playoffs for the first time in his career. But given the seriousness of his health condition, it would have been too risky and too dangerous for him to play, and the medical staff would save him from himself by not letting him play. With his absence, the Raptors were able to catch a bit of a break for this series. But even without Bosh, it would still be a tough task to beat this Heat squad who was more experienced. Outside of Dwayne Wade, they also had veterans like Joe Johnson and Luol Deng, who were both formerly All-Stars with a long resume of playoff experience. But thanks to having the number 2 seed, the Raptors would still have the home court advantage. After 2 days of rest, Game 1 of the series would tip off. And throughout the game, it was very scrappy and competitive, with both teams giving it to each other. Fast forward to late in the game with 3 seconds left, the Heat were up by 3 after Hassan Whiteside hit 1 of 2 free throws. With no timeouts, the Raptors would have to heave up a prayer from like half court to give themselves a chance at tying the game. Off the inbound, Lowry would quickly bring the ball down to half court and in the final second would quickly heave up a half court shot which goes in. Nothing but net. He had been struggling all game and miraculously drains a Hail Mary from half court to tie the game at the buzzer, sending it to overtime. But in the end, it didn't matter as the Heat would still come out on top, winning Game 1 by a score of 102-96. Once again, the Raptors couldn't seem to shake the Game 1 curse. Therefore, they needed to respond in Game 2 to avoid going down 2-0. Game 2 would be another dogfight, with neither team letting up. Late in the game, with the Raptors up by 3, the Heat would tie the game off a clutch 3-pointer from Goran Dragic with 10 seconds left. After a timeout, Lowry would have the ball in his hands yet again, this time for a game winner, but his three-point shot attempt would miss at the buzzer, making it the second straight overtime game for this series. This time, the Raptors would have control in the overtime period, never trailing again and never looking back, as they would win Game 2 by a score of 96-92, tying the series. It was now time for the Raptors to go on the road and play on Miami's turf for Game 3. Going into halftime, the Raptors had control of the game early with a 9-point lead. Going into the fourth quarter, the Heat would come back and tie the game, and in the fourth quarter, it would be a close one, but the Raptors would still come out on top and win by a score of 95-91 to go up 2-1 in the series. Off a 33-point performance by Lowry, he had been struggling the whole playoffs, playing with bursitis in his right elbow, which affected his shooting performance. And in Game 3 of the second round, he would finally wake up, carrying the team on his back to take the series lead. Game 4, the Raptors would be without their starting center, Jonas Valanciunas, after having suffered an ankle injury in Game 3. And it was next man up. Bismack Biyombo would be inserted into the starting lineup. Now, both teams were shorthanded with one of their starters injured. This time, with both Lowry and DeRozan struggling, the Raptors were down 9 at halftime. But everyone else was able to contribute to help the Raptors stay in the game during the second half, including Biyombo, who was dominating the boards and leading the game in rebounds. The Raptors would surge back in the third quarter and would take a 2-point lead heading into the fourth. Late in the quarter, the Raptors were up by 4 with just a minute 30 left, and even without Valanciunas, they seemed to have been on their way to taking a 3-1 lead. But the Heat would stay in it. Joe Johnson would draw a foul and hit 2 free throws, cutting the lead to 2. After failing to put the game away on their next possession with 2 missed jumpers, the Heat would get a stop with a chance to tie. And with 12 seconds left, Dwayne Wade would score a layup and tie the game. The Raptors would call timeout with an opportunity to win the game. Corey Joseph would have the ball, but would miss his shot attempt, and for the third time in this series, we were going into overtime. Heavy minutes was being played in this series for the first 3 games. In the overtime period, the Heat would have all the momentum and run away with it, winning Game 4 by a score of 94-87 to tie the series, off a 30-point performance by Dwayne Wade. It was time for the Raptors to head back home for Game 5. With Valanciunas being ruled out for the remainder of the series, they would still have to dig deep and try win without him. But thankfully, they had Biyombo to fill in for him, and his energy on defense would be a key factor in helping the Raptors get the W. In the second quarter, there was a sequence where he had a put-back dunk off a missed shot, and on the other end, blocks Dwayne Wade's dunk, getting the Raptors a stop, and on the very next possession, would go back the other way, running down the court, taking the feed from DeRozan to throw it down. He was plus 15 on the floor with a stat line of 10 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 blocks. The Raptors were in control for most of the game, leading by 10 at halftime, and then leading by 13 heading into the fourth quarter. They would continue to maintain the lead and hold off the Heat, winning Game 5 by a score of 99-91 to take a 3-2 lead. Both Lowry and DeRozan would carry the team to victory. Lowry had a monster double-double performance, scoring 25 points along with 10 rebounds. That's right, he grabbed 10 rebounds despite being the smallest dude on the court. DeRozan led the way with a game-high 34 points in the win. The Raptors would head back to Miami for Game 6 to close it out, but with their season on the line, the Heat would come out swinging, leading by 8 at halftime, maintaining the lead in the third quarter, and would do the same in the fourth quarter, winning Game 6 by a score of 103-91 to force a Game 7. Both Lowry and DeRozan had combined for 59 points, but the rest of the team was a no-show, as they were the only players on the team to score double digits, and then it was time for Game 7. Up until this point, this was the farthest the Raptors have ever gone during the playoffs in franchise history. Last time they had this long of a playoff run was back in the 2001 playoffs, where they took an Allen Iverson-led Sixers team to 7 games in the second round, and were 1 missed shot away at the buzzer from advancing to the conference finals. 15 years later, the Raptors finally had the opportunity to change that, and luckily, they had the home court advantage this time. Throughout the first 3 quarters, the game was fairly close. The Raptors were up 1 at the end of the first quarter. By halftime, they were up by 6. By the end of the third quarter, it was still far from over as they led by 8. But in the fourth quarter, it was all Raptors, outscoring the Heat 30-11, and they would come out on top and win Game 7 by a score of 116-89. This time, everybody in their starting lineup stepped up and made a contribution, as they scored a combined 105 points, and for the first time in franchise history, the Raptors were making out the second round and advanced to the conference finals. But they would have another tough task ahead of them. Waiting for them was the Cavaliers, who had been undefeated the whole playoffs after sweeping both their first and second round opponents. Also, with their victory, the Raptors had played spoiler, preventing a never-before-seen LeBron versus Wade playoff matchup that NBA fans wanted to see. The media was already talking about it before the series was over, as if it were going to happen. But the Raptors killed that noise and proved the doubters wrong. Now they had something more to prove. Everybody predicted the Raptors wouldn't stand a chance in this series and were expecting it to be a clean sweep. And rightfully so, since the Raptors didn't have the experience and the Cavs were the clear-cut favorites to come out the East again. Also, they were the number 1 seed, which meant the Raptors would have to play their first 2 games on the road this time. And boy, was it ugly. Game 1, they would get smacked, losing by 31, and Game 2, they would get beat up yet again, losing by 19. Back-to-back blowout losses, and by this time, Valanciunas was still out with that ankle injury. But the Raptors had already proven to be a better home team during the postseason, no matter who they faced and no matter the circumstance. So in Game 3, they had a chance to respond. By this time, Luis Scola would be reinserted into the starting lineup, with Patrick Patterson behind him still playing heavy minutes at power forward. Game 3, the Raptors were steadily in control. At the end of the first quarter, they were up by 3. They would have a very good second quarter, leading by 13 at halftime. And from there, it was pretty much on cruise control for the Raptors as they were able to hold off the Cavs and win Game 3 by a score of 99-84, off a game-high 32 points by DeRozan. Game 4, the Raptors remained committed to protecting their home court and preventing a 3-1 deficit, and it nearly played out the same way. A 3-point lead at the end of the first quarter, a monster second quarter, and a 16-point lead at halftime. But this time, the second half would be a lot more closer. The Cavs would stay in it throughout the third quarter, cutting the lead to 9, and would come back to take the lead with 8 minutes left in the game. For the next few minutes, it was back and forth, with both teams really fighting to win this game. With under 5 minutes left and the Raptors down by 2, DeRozan hits a mid-range shot to tie the game. They would then regain the lead and go up by 5 with roughly 2 minutes left. Next Cavs possession, Kyrie hits a 3 to make it a 2-point game. Next Raptors possession, DeRozan misses the shot, but Patterson would grab the offensive board and feed the ball back to DeRozan for a layup to put the Raptors up by 4 with a minute and a half left. On the next Cavs possession, Biyombo makes a huge defensive play, blocking J.R. Smith's 3-point shot attempt, and on the Raptors' next possession, Lowry scores a layup with 22 seconds left to put the game away. And just like that, the Raptors would win Game 4, coming out on top 105-99 to tie the series 2-2. Lowry and DeRozan combined for 67 points, carrying the team to victory, and with that result, the Raptors shocked everybody. They all said this would be a sweep, but instead, we got a competitive series. Now the pressure was on the Cavs to win Game 5 on their home floor. The Raptors seemed to have found some momentum. They were now just 2 wins away from making the NBA Finals. Plus, Valanciunas was finally able to return for Game 5, giving them a better shot at possibly taking a 3-2 series lead. But all that didn't matter. From the start, the Cavs were scorching, had an 18-point lead at the end of the first quarter, were up by 31 at halftime, and the lead grew even larger in the third quarter. The game was pretty much over as soon as it started, as the Raptors would get demolished in Game 5 by a score of 116-78. The Cavs would regain the series lead, going up 3-2. The Cavs' big three combined for 71 points, while nobody on the Raptors could even score 20. It was then time for the Raptors to come back home for Game 6. It was do or die for them. They had to come out with way more energy and give a better effort if they want to keep their season alive and force a Game 7. The Raptors were able to have a better first quarter, only down by 6 heading into the second quarter. But from here, the Cavs slowly but surely pulled away. By halftime, they were up by 14. In the third quarter, the Raptors were able to stay afloat, barely cutting into the deficit, but in the fourth quarter, they would run out of gas, and the Cavs would pull away, expanding the lead and putting the game way out of reach, as they would win Game 6 by a score of 113-87 to close out the series and go back to the finals for the second straight year. Lowry and DeRozan carried with a combined 65 points, but had little to no help from their teammates in the game, and the Cavs' big three was just too much for them, as they scored a combined 83 points. Despite the loss, the fans still cheered on their team at the end of the game, showing their appreciation for their hard work and how far they came this season. Even LeBron couldn't help but acknowledge how great the fans were in that building during his post-game interview. And of course, the Cavs would also end up winning the chip against the Warriors. The Raptors had finished the season with their heads held high, having overachieved and reaching a place the franchise had never been before. 2 hard-fought 7-game series, and putting up a fight in the conference finals against the best team in the East. This was a monumental step in the franchise towards the ultimate goal of finally winning a championship. But it would still be a fight to get there in the coming seasons. In the 2016 offseason, the front office had some tough decisions to make. They had to prioritize keeping DeRozan, who was their franchise player. He had opted out to become a free agent, looking to re-sign on a max contract, and they would do just that, giving him the 5-year max. But with that signing, they didn't have the cap space to keep Biyombo, who had also become a free agent, which was a huge loss for their front line. They had signed him for cheap, and his price had went up after his impressive playoff performance, and also setting new franchise rebounding records that have still yet to be broken. But they couldn't afford to keep him, leaving them with no choice but to let him walk in free agency, as he would sign a 4-year $72 million deal with the Orlando Magic. Now heading into the 2016-17 season, the Raptors were without a high-energy big to crash the boards and protect the rim. But they still had a couple first-round draft picks, and to compensate for the loss of Biyombo, they would use both picks to draft a couple bigs. With the 9th overall pick, they would draft Jakob Poeltl, a 7-foot center, and with the 27th overall pick, they would draft Pascal Siakam, a 6'8" power forward who would also end up being another building block in the Raptors' pursuit of a championship. And in free agency, they made a couple moves. They would sign Fred VanVleet, who was an undrafted rookie, and was also another piece to the puzzle. That year, he would start off as a 3rd stringer. Then, they would strategically sign an injured Jared Sullinger to a 1-year deal, who they would later use as a trading piece to improve their roster. Now, the Raptors had high expectations to contend for a championship. The pressure was on, and the Raptors seemed to be just fine for the most part. By January, there were 15 games above 500. Both Lowry and DeRozan were balling out. having the best season of their careers and looking like the best backcourt in the East. But in the coming weeks, they suddenly started to struggle. They would go on a 5-game losing streak and went 4-11 in their next 15 games. They would start to fall in the standings and were now just 8 games above 500. It was clear that some moves needed to be made quickly to improve the roster. They would trade Terrence Ross to the Orlando Magic for Serge Ibaka, and they would trade Jared Sullinger to the Phoenix Suns for PJ Tucker, 2 defensive specialists that would greatly help the Raptors for the remainder of the season. They would crawl back into the top 3 and finish as the number 3 seed with a 51-31 record. In the first round against the Bucks, they would win the series in 6 games to advance, but this time they would run into the Cavs in the second round since they were the number 2 seed that year. And this time, the Raptors would get swept by the Cavs. Plus, Lowry had been injured in Game 1 and couldn't play the rest of the series to help his team. This time, it was clear that the Raptors had more work to do. They needed some shooting. Their small forward, DeMarre Carroll, had immediately started to regress, and they would trade him away to the Brooklyn Nets to get off his contract and clear up cap space. And in free agency, they would let Patrick Patterson go, whose shooting numbers also regressed. They had also lost PJ Tucker as well, who ended up signing to the Rockets. Raptors would end up trading Corey Joseph to the Pacers for CJ Miles, who was an elite 3-point shooter, providing the Raptors with some much-needed floor spacing. That summer, they would also draft OG Anunoby, who would be their starting wing. They would also keep Ibaka and Lowry, re-signing them to 3-year deals. They would also have some young developing talent on their bench. Now, heading into the 2017-18 NBA season and a full training camp together, the Raptors seem to have their best ever constructed roster from top to bottom. Experts predicted them to finish as no better than a 3 seed, but they would finish far better than everyone expected, winning 59 games and finishing as the number 1 seed. This would end up being their best ever regular season. Now, the Raptors were looked at as a possible favorite to come out the East. In the first round, they would get revenge against the Wizards, beating them in 6 games, avenging their 2015 playoff loss. But in the second round, they would yet again bump into the Cavs, who were the number 4 seed. And history would continue to repeat itself as the Raptors would once again get swept by the Cavs. Despite Kyrie no longer being on the team. For a team with expectations of making it to the finals, this was bad. All that winning they did in the regular season was for nothing. They became the first ever number 1 seed to get swept before the conference finals. DeRozan was so awful that he would end up getting benched, and they just had no answer for LeBron. In the 2018 offseason, it was certain that some major changes were for sure gonna happen, and the Raptors would drop the hammer on some serious moves. They would fire their head coach Dwayne Casey despite winning Coach of the Year. They would replace him by promoting their assistant head coach Nick Nurse. After falling short in the finals yet again, LeBron would leave the Cavs and finally leave the Eastern Conference by joining the Lakers in free agency. And at that point, the Raptors thought they now had an easier path and felt like they no longer had anything to worry about now that LeBron was out the way. But the front office thought otherwise. They had something up their sleeves. They would shock the NBA world by trading away DeMar DeRozan to the San Antonio Spurs for Kawhi Leonard. And in that same trade package, they would also send away Jakob Poeltl for Danny Green. As risky as this trade was, this sent a message to the rest of the league that the Raptors were in win-now mode. Their window was starting to close, and it was time for them to take some risks. 2018-19 season, it was go time, and they would waste no time getting some W's. They started off 6-0. In their first few weeks, they were 12-1. By December, they were 20-4. And even though the Raptors were winning, it still wasn't enough. The front office would make another big move, trading away JV, CJ Miles, and DeLon Wright to the Memphis Grizzlies for Marc Gasol, who was the final piece to the puzzle. The Raptors would finish the season winning 58 games and the number 2 seed. In the first round, they would beat the Magic in 5 games. In the second round, they would beat the Sixers in 7 games off that legendary game winner by Kawhi, helping the Raptors make it back to the conference finals for the first time in 3 years. In this series, they would face the number 1 seeded Milwaukee Bucks, led by Giannis and Chris Middleton, a team that had just started to ascend as a top contender in the East. The Raptors were down 2-0 in the series, but would crawl back and win 4 straight, beating the Bucks in 6 games. And for the first time ever, the Raptors come out the East and were in the NBA Finals. But they were still 4 wins away from their ultimate goal. In their way was the defending champion Golden State Warriors, a loaded super team who had just won back-to-back titles and was looking to three-peat. But with no Kevin Durant, who was out with a calf injury, who had regrettably attempted to come back and play on one leg in this series while they were down 3-1, and with Klay Thompson going down in the next game with a torn ACL, the Raptors were able to take advantage and beat the Warriors in 6 games, winning their first ever NBA championship. That risky trade for Kawhi paid off in a big way, and all the other puzzle pieces that they had been putting together over the last 3 years to build a championship team from the ground up. And even though Kawhi left in free agency, the Raptors were still an elite team the following year, who were looking to defend their title. In a pandemic-shortened season that paused for a few months and would later be continued in the bubble, the Raptors still won 50-plus games and finished as the number 2 seed. Even without Kawhi, the championship DNA was definitely still there, and Nick Nurse would win Coach of the Year. In the playoffs, they would easily sweep a shorthanded Brooklyn Nets team in the first round. But in the second round, they would fall short to the Celtics in a hard-fought 7-game series. This would also be the end of the Raptors' 7-year playoff streak. And one by one, all the players from the 2019 championship team including the coach, had left over the following years as the Raptors started to rebuild and head in a new direction. Now, after making it back to the playoffs this year, their pursuit of a second championship continues. That concludes this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Music, travel, gaming, sports, and random content all in one. Let's go Raptors, we the North, and until next time, peace out, take care, and God bless.
DJ 91.